Sian. I halas a hut. Agames, targamest agamet, and be a true and tuiapone. Datrain or tuiamet, and ran on. I pulled into the school lot just as the last bell rang, my truck cap still warm from the morning run to the site. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. One message. I figured it was my foreman about the drywall delivery. It wasn't. Dubai worked out. I'm staying. I took the joint account. Don't make this ugly. I sat with the engine running and the heat on and the windshield starting to fog at the edges. My daughter Lily was walking out through the double doors right then, her backpack too big for her frame, looking left, then right, then finding my truck and waving both arms like she always did. 6 years old and waving like she hadn't seen me in a month. I waved back. I kept my face level. She climbed in, smelling of paste and apple juice, and said, "Dad, we made volcanoes today. Mine exploded the most." I said, "That's my girl." I pulled out of the lot and drove home in the kind of silence that isn't peaceful. My wife, the woman I'd put my name on a mortgage with, the woman whose hands I'd held in the delivery room while she cried and laughed at the same time, had just sent me 9 words and a period. Her name is Marina. And this is the part of the story I don't talk about at cookouts. My name is Joel Hart. I'm 32. I frame houses for a living, which means I know how things are supposed to be built and how they fall apart when someone cuts corners on the foundation. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, the kind of neighborhood where everyone kept their grass short and their problems internal. My dad fixed cars. My mom taught 2nd grade. They're still married. I thought that was just what people did. Marina and I met in Charlotte. She was doing marketing for a tech startup that sold software to hotels. I was finishing a commercial build 2 blocks from her office. We spent 4 months eating lunch on the same park bench before I finally said anything useful. She laughed at my bad jokes. She ordered black coffee and drank it like she meant it. I thought I understood her. We got married in Asheville in October. Small wedding. Her mother, Lydia, flew in from Phoenix and spent the reception giving me the kind of smile that means you'll do for now. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marina said her mother was just protective. Those 2 sentences did a lot of work over the next 3 years. The job that started everything was called the Horizon Residences, a mixed-use tower in Dubai. Marina's company had landed the hotel management contract, and she was supposed to go for 6 weeks to oversee the brand rollout. I drove her to the airport on a Thursday in January. Lily drew a card that said "Come back fast" in purple marker. Marina folded it and put it in her carry-on. I watched her walk through security and thought, 6 weeks. That was 14 months before the text. I didn't panic in the car. That came later. First, I went through the motions. Made Lily her dinner. Helped with homework. Read 2 chapters of the book about the rabbit who couldn't sleep. Sat on the edge of her bed until her breathing slowed. I kissed her forehead and closed the door, and then I stood in the hallway for about 30 seconds and let my legs do whatever they needed to do. They held. Barely. I went to the kitchen table and opened my banking app. The joint savings, 8 years of discipline, birthday money, the Christmas bonuses I never spent, showed a balance of $214. She hadn't cleaned it out completely. The $214 felt deliberate, like a signature. I checked the checking account. Also thin. A charge from a Dubai hotel 2 days ago. A charge from somewhere called Maison Elise the week before that I didn't recognize. Small transfers over the last 4 months to an account I didn't have access to. $60. Nini. $120. Small enough that I'd written them off as subscriptions. I hadn't looked close enough. I hadn't been looking at all. Rent was due in 9 days. I sat at that table for a while. Long enough for the leftover heat from dinner to leave the kitchen. Long enough to stop waiting for a follow-up text that explained it was a misunderstanding. Or that she'd been hacked. The text was real. The balance was real. Lily's breathing from down the hall was the realest thing in the house, and it was the thing I anchored to. I took a legal pad from the junk drawer and wrote down what I knew how to do. I could call Tommy about pulling extra hours on the Concord build. I had 3 weeks of materials in the garage I could sell. The truck was paid off. The house was not, but it was ours. Mine, technically, because Marina had asked me to keep it in my name when we bought it, to help her credit from an old judgment she'd never fully explained. At the bottom of the list, I wrote one more thing. Called Derek. Derek Nance had been my friend since junior high. He'd gone on to law school, while I went to the job site. He practiced family law in Raleigh, the kind of cases that made him tired in a specific way. I hadn't called him in months. I texted instead. Need help. Real kind. Call me when you can. He called in 12 minutes. The mail had been piling by the door for a week. Marina used to sort it. After she left, after the first Dubai trip, after the 6 weeks became open-ended. I kept meaning to deal with it and didn't. Then after I texted Derek, I went through the stack. Most of it was what you'd expect. A water bill, a coupon mailer, a form from Lily's school about the spring fundraiser, then an envelope from a law office in Phoenix, Marina's mother's city. I opened it standing at the counter and read it twice. It was a notice of a legal claim on the house, not a full lien, but a preliminary assertion of interest. The language was dense, and I'm not a lawyer, but I understood the shape of it. Lydia was saying she had contributed to the down payment and was now asserting partial ownership. There was a date stamp from 6 weeks ago. I thought about the down payment. We'd accepted help from Lydia. Marina had presented it as a gift. A check for $15,000. No paperwork, no conversation about repayment. Marina had said, "That's just how my mom shows love." I had written a thank you note. I had not hired an attorney to review the transfer. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not on a chair. The floor. Sometimes the floor is where the truth lands first. I photographed the letter and texted it to Derek with a message that said there's more. Then I went to bed and did not sleep until it was almost light, and Lily came padding in, asking if we could have waffles. We had waffles. The next 2 days moved in the way that crisis days move. Slow when you're sitting still, fast when something happens. What happened was a conversation with Derek. He drove down from Raleigh on a Saturday and sat at my kitchen table with his laptop while Lily watched cartoons in the other room. He had the careful energy of a person who has learned not to react visibly to bad news. He listened while I talked. He looked at the texts, the bank statements, the letter from Phoenix. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "The good news is she left a trail. People who act fast and messy always do." The bad news, he said, was timing. Marina's mother had been building something. The Phoenix attorney had filed a preliminary claim before Marina even sent me the text, which meant this had been in motion for weeks. Maybe longer. It wasn't a woman leaving a marriage on a feeling. It was a woman leaving an arrangement she and her mother had been quietly unwinding. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Everything you've got," he said. "And don't contact Marina. Don't ask her to explain. Every message you send is an exhibit." I thought about that. About how many messages I'd already drafted and deleted in the past 48 hours, the ones that started with "why" and ended with "please." I was glad I deleted them. "What about Lily?" I asked. He looked at me steadily. "That's the whole case," he said. "I called in a favor with a woman named Carol at my bank branch. Not an official favor, just the kind where she'd flag anything unusual and let me know before it became a problem. She called me 3 days later. Marina had tried to close a linked savings account I'd opened before we were married, an account in my name only, with a small balance I kept for emergencies. The bank had flagged it because Marina wasn't listed. The closure request had come from a Dubai IP address. I documented it, date, time, Carol's name, the request number. I was getting methodical. Derek had told me that emotion was the enemy of evidence, and I was starting to believe him. I had a folder on my laptop. I had a notebook. I had a timeline on graph paper taped to the inside of the garage door where Lily wouldn't see it. I wrote down every charge I'd found, every transfer, every date I could remember when something had felt off, but I'd explained it away. There were more of those than I wanted to count. Marina's company had a U.S. office in Charlotte. I had no legal standing to walk in there, but Derek did. He sent a formal request for employment verification as part of a legal proceeding, which the HR department was obligated to respond to. What came back changed the shape of things. Marina had resigned from the Charlotte office 11 months ago. Her current employment was with the Dubai entity directly, a subsidiary technically registered in the UAE, with a listed U.S. contact, Lydia Voss. Lydia Voss, maiden name. Marina's mother's name before she remarried. The company Marina was working for in Dubai had an American point of contact, who was her mother using her birth name. A name that didn't appear anywhere in our 3 years of conversations about Marina's career, her company, her opportunities abroad. I read the HR response 3 times. Then I called Derek. "They set this up," I said. Yeah, he said. That's what it looks like. The custody filing from Marina's attorney arrived on a Thursday. I was on a job site when Derek called to tell me it had been submitted. I sat in my truck in the site lot, and he read me the key language. She was seeking primary custody of Lily and proposing a visitation schedule that had me seeing my daughter every other weekend. Every other weekend. The petition described me as a solo income laborer with unstable hours and a domestic history suggesting emotional volatility. That last phrase was the sharpest. I knew what it was pointing at. There had been a period after Lily was born. A hard 18 months I'd gone through. Exhaustion that turned dark at the edges. A stretch when I'd needed help. I'd gotten that help. I'd done the work. I hadn't hidden it from Marina. I trusted her with it. Now it was an illegal filing. I sat in the truck until my jaw unclenched. Then I called Derek back and said, "What do we do?" "We tell the truth first," he said. "Before they can spin it. You submit your own mental health documentation with context. You show the court what you did and what it cost you and what came out of it. Transparency beats a weapon." I called the therapist I'd seen during that period, Dr. Anita Shah. She'd moved to a practice in Durham, but she remembered me. She agreed to write a letter. Not a defense exactly. A record. 3 years of clean health. A father who had shown up and kept showing up. It was Lily who found the notebook, not the graph paper. A smaller one, Marina's, left in the bottom drawer of her nightstand, which I hadn't touched since she'd gone. Lily had been looking for a pencil. She came to me with it and said, "Daddy, this has writing I can't read." Most of it was shorthand and Spanish, which Marina had been practicing. But there were pages in English. Notes, dates, and bullet points. One page near the back had 2 columns. One was labeled assets and one was labeled his exposure. Under his exposure, the word history. Then, in parentheses, use if needed. I photographed every page. I sent them to Derek that night. He called back in the morning. His voice had a new register. "She planned to use your mental health history against you if you contested anything. It was a contingency. This shows premeditation." I thought about Lily finding that notebook, about how she'd held it out to me like it was just a misplaced item, like it was nothing. I thought about how 6 years old is old enough to be confused and not old enough to understand why. I thought about every other weekend. I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be when my daughter was old enough to ask me what happened. "File everything," I told Derek. "All of it." The hearing was in Charlotte. An October morning, low sky, the kind of gray that doesn't commit to rain. I wore the same jacket I'd worn to every job interview I'd ever had. Derek wore a tie. We walked in with a 2-inch binder and a USB drive, and the kind of preparation that only works if you stopped hoping for mercy and started trusting the record. Marina was there with her attorney. She looked thinner and more composed than I expected. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Lydia wasn't present. Her attorney had submitted a statement. The judge was a man named Calloway, who had the energy of someone who had seen most things and was not easily moved. He read from papers for a while before anyone spoke. When he looked up, he asked Marina's attorney to explain the basis for the custody petition. The attorney delivered his version. Unstable hours. Emotional history. A home environment that may not provide optimal consistency. Then Derek stood up. He was quiet about it. He doesn't perform. He just moved through the record. The employment history. The Dubai subsidiary. Lydia Voss appearing under her maiden name as U.S. contact for the company employing her daughter. The letter from the Phoenix attorney filed before Marina sent the text. The notebook. He read the 2 columns aloud. Assets as exposure. The room went very still. Calloway looked at Marina. She had stopped not looking at me. She was staring at the table. Her attorney objected to the notebook on chain of custody grounds, which Derek had anticipated. He submitted a photograph of the drawer, time-stamped, and a declaration from me explaining how it was found. The judge admitted it. When Derek played the audio from the voicemail Marina had left on her own phone's transcription service, a habit of hers I discovered while going through the phone records, recording reminders to herself, and the recording included the phrase, "Once the petition is filed, Joel won't have time to recover before the hearing." Marina's attorney asked for a recess. We took 15 minutes. When we came back, the hearing was shorter than I expected. Calloway ordered a 90-day investigation period. Temporary custody to me. Marina's access supervised and limited. The Phoenix claim on the house frozen pending investigation. The Dubai employment arrangement referred to a financial crimes liaison for review. When the clerk stamped the paperwork, the sound was small and final. I didn't cry until I was in the parking garage with the door shut. Not long. Just a release that comes when something you've been holding for months finally has somewhere to go. Derek stood outside the truck and gave me time without asking if I was okay. Which was exactly right. On the drive home, I called my mother. She cried the way moms cry when the worst didn't happen, which is louder than most other crying. I told her I'd explain the rest in person. I told her Lily was fine. Lily was at my neighbor Pam's house. When I picked her up, she showed me a drawing she'd made. A house with a sun over it and two figures outside, one tall and one small. She'd labeled them Dad and me. Pam saw my face and quietly refilled my coffee without saying anything. I drove home under a sky that had finally decided to clear, and for the first time since January, I turned on the radio. The investigation took 4 months. What the financial examiner found in those months was a structure that was cleaner than I'd hoped and uglier than I'd feared. The Dubai subsidiary had received funds from the joint account transfers I'd flagged. Those funds had moved into an entity called Voss Maritime Holdings, my last name on a company I'd never signed anything for. The forged signature was traced to a notarization in Phoenix. Lydia's City. Lydia's notary, it turned out. The Rowan Trust, I named it for what I wanted it to mean, not for any person, was what the court converted those assets into, a protected fund in Lily's name, overseen by an independent trustee. I didn't want Marina's mother's money in my house, but I wanted it somewhere Lily couldn't be cheated out of it when she was old enough to need it. Derek called on a Friday afternoon with the final numbers. He laughed a little at the end, not because it was funny, but because sometimes when things resolve, laughter is the only sound left that makes sense. Marina called 2 weeks after the final ruling. She was brief and careful, the way people are when they know a conversation is being documented by habit. "What you did was cruel," she said. I thought about that for a second. About the $214 left in the savings account. About the words his exposure in 2 neat columns. "No," I said. What I did was stay. She didn't respond to that. I heard the ambient sound of wherever she was. Air conditioning, maybe a lobby. Then she said, "She's going to ask questions when she's older." "I know," I said. "I'll tell her the truth." The line went quiet, and then it ended. Spring came back the way it always does in Greensboro. Slow and then all at once. I finished the Concord build, landed 2 new residential contracts, and converted half my garage into a proper workshop. I built Lily a bed frame with a bookshelf headboard. She picked the stain. She chose a color called honey walnut and stood next to me while I brushed it on, asking questions about how wood drinks color. Some mornings she still asks about her mom. I answer what I can. I keep the answers honest and short, and I don't fill in the edges she doesn't ask about yet. She's 7 now. She'll ask more when she's ready. On a Saturday in April, Derek came down with his daughter, who is 9 and bossy in a way Lily respects. They ran around the backyard while Derek and I sat on the steps with coffee, not talking about the case, not talking about much of anything, just sitting with the specific quiet that comes after a long war when the field is finally empty. At some point, Lily ran over and climbed onto my lap, even though she's too big for that now. And she didn't say anything, just sat there for a minute like she was checking that I was still solid. I was. That's the whole story, or the part of it that can be told. I started over with 2 contracts and a truck and a daughter, who still waves with both arms when she sees me in a parking lot. I don't have the 8 years of savings back. I don't have the version of my life I thought I was building. I have something better. I have something that was real the whole time, even when everything else turned out to be paper. If you've ever found yourself reading a text that rearranged everything, if you've ever had to decide between staying quiet and staying whole, I hope this reaches you. I hope you're somewhere safe. Say listening in the comments, tell me where you are. I read everyone. I've thought a lot about what actually happened. Not the legal version, not the version I tell people at job sites when they ask why I seem different than I used to. The real version. The one where I sit with the cause and the effect and try to be honest about both. Marina didn't become who she became in a day. Neither did I. The choices that led to that parking lot text were made slowly, over years, in small rooms where I kept choosing to look away. I saw the hotel charge and wrote it off. I heard Lydia's comments and laughed at them. I watched the distance grow and called it weather. I made those choices because I wanted the life we'd agreed to more than I wanted the truth about the life we were actually living. That's on me, not the betrayal. She owns that. But the not seeing, the deciding not to look, that was my contribution to how things ended. What I've come to understand is that people who build things in secret, schemes, plans, contingency columns in notebooks, they are not as powerful as they believe they are. The same carelessness that lets someone act dishonestly is the carelessness that leaves a trail. Lydia used her maiden name on a company document and didn't think I'd ever check. Marina left a notebook in a nightstand drawer and didn't think a 6-year-old would go looking for a pencil. The plan had gaps because plans built on dishonesty always do. Honesty requires you to account for reality. Deception only has to fool one person long enough. It's a shorter task, but a fragile one. The thing I'm most grateful for, and it took me a long time to call it gratitude, is that I didn't respond the way I wanted to that first night. I wanted to call Marina and yell until my voice gave out. I wanted to drive to the airport and make a scene that would have ended up as the first exhibit in her custody filing. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a list of things I could control. That list didn't feel like wisdom at the time. It felt like the only thing standing between me and a decision I couldn't walk back. But discipline in the worst moment is the thing that makes every other moment possible. I didn't know that then. I know it now. What I had to learn is that integrity isn't something you perform when people are watching. It's what you do at midnight, at a kitchen table, when the banking app is showing you a number that shouldn't exist, and your daughter is asleep down the hall, trusting you to hold it together. Nobody gave me credit for those nights. Derek didn't see them. The judge didn't see them. But Lily will grow up in a house that was kept, and that is the only receipt I need. I think about the notebook sometimes. The 2 columns. Assets. His exposure. Someone sat down and decided at the most honest years of my life, the part where I asked for help and did the work and came back, could be turned into a weapon. And I think about how it didn't work. Not because the world is fair, but because I had built something that could be verified. The therapy notes existed. The clean years existed. Dr. Shaw's letter existed. The truth has a paper trail too, if you've been living it. I started over with a truck, 2 contracts, and a daughter who draws houses with suns over them. I didn't get the 8 years back, but I got something I didn't know I needed. Proof that I was capable of the hardest version of myself. That proof doesn't go away. You carry it forward. You use it the next time something asks you to break. If you're in the middle of something that feels like the end, I want you to know it probably isn't. Build your record. Tell the truth out loud, on paper, in court if you have to. The truth is slower than a lie, but it outlasts it every time. That's what I know now. That's what this cost me to learn.